This is my ID card. It allows me access to certain places and allows me to do certain things because I have it. Wouldn't it be great if we could look in the wallets of really young people, ages 8, 9, 10, and see if they were going to be a future leader, that they carried a card that said future CEO? Well, believe it or not, it may not be a card that looks like this, but we do have a way of identifying them. I'm Alan Nelson. Welcome to another edition of KidLead. Now, we talk about the importance of identifying CEOs of the future, but before we do that, we sort of need to define leadership, right? Because to understand what leaders do, we need to understand what leadership is. I had over 700 books of leadership in my library, and I found that less than 5% even attempted to define what they were talking about. People just assumed if you talk about leadership, everyone knows what you mean. But that's not true. In fact, I found there are a lot of different opinions of leadership. So let me give you my stake in the ground version now that we're going to help you understand the rest of what I'm going to talk about. I define leadership as the process of helping people accomplish together what they would not or could not as individuals. Leaders are those who get it going, and leading is how they do it. You see, again, it's very important for us to understand a good definition of leadership because leadership is a lot of things to a lot of people. I found that in a lot of literature pertaining to young leaders, it really isn't about organizational leadership. It's more about self-actualization, character, service. These are all great qualities, but they don't necessarily distinguish what leaders do differently than non-leaders. Let me give you an example. In this Venn diagram, we have two circles. One circle, the blue, talks about qualities we seek in strong people. The other one, the amber one, are qualities we seek in leaders. Now, if you look at the overlap, you realize that there are some qualities that relate to both what we seek in strong people and what we seek in leaders. So let's distinguish between the areas that overlap and the areas that are distinct, uniquely what leaders do. So the non-essential qualities, these will refer to type 2, that's the overlap. And the essential qualities, type 1, these are the unique things that leaders have as opposed to non-leaders. So type 2 leader qualities include things like 21st century skills. We hear a lot about that in schools today. These include critical thinking, collaboration, creativity, and communication. These are all very important skills that employers are looking for in graduates of education. And at the same time, they look for other things. They want people who are confident, who have high self-esteem, people who are also humble and open-minded, people who are moral and ethical, positive and hopeful, charismatic and likable, smart, intelligent, flexible, adaptable. I think if we all look at these lists, we would agree that we want people to be just like this for our leaders. But at the same time, we'd have to admit we also want them in our team members. We're really looking at people who are great participants in organizational life, not just leaders. So let's look at the unique qualities, the type 1 qualities that help us understand what leaders uniquely do so that we can identify what future CEOs look like now. So the type 1 leader qualities have more to do with who's likely to emerge as a leader. It helps us be predictive. Type 2 leader qualities that we just went over, they have more to do with leadership excellence, how effective leaders act and behave. Those are helpful when you're doing a 360 or self-assessments that allow you to improve as a leader. But how do you predict who's likely to become a leader? That's a whole different approach. So our work over the last few years, literally with thousands of students around the world, have taught us a lot about understanding this as well as interacting with those who interact with them. So let me give you a quick introduction of these, and then we'll illustrate each and allow you to get an idea of who's likely to become a future CEO or a future leader. Now, conveniently, we've given all of these a same alliteration here. It starts with P. They tend to be persuasive, propelled, planners, and power sensitive or power oriented. So let me define each one, give you a couple illustrations so that you can do a predictive work on the leaders around you. So the first P is persuasive. And that means the ability to get others to see things differently and buy into your ideas and vision. Another term related to this is social potency. So they make an influence and other people notice, other people follow. Now, we need to understand that all four of these elements here, these 4 Ps, will work in combination with each other. It's kind of like a recipe. You need all 4 parts, all 4 ingredients. Having said that, a child or a person can be persuasive and not a leader, but leaders have to be persuasive. They are constantly persuading people to believe their ideas, to follow their plans, to allow them to make decisions, and basically they are sellers of ideas. So an example of this would be when other students listen to or seek out his or her opinions. And again, most educators realize this, people who work with youth realize this, that even as early as grade school, we start to see certain individual kids who, when they say something, others listen and follow, and often in meetings, people will seek out their opinions. A second example of this is a student is a good negotiator. So it's not necessarily the kid throwing a tantrum on aisle 4 at Walmart. We're talking about the kid who can walk into your room and convince you that even though their curfew or their bedtime is 9 p.m., tonight, even though it's a school night, is an exception and they should be able to stay up until 10 p.m. and you allow them to do that. You leave their room and you say, how do they always do that? Well, it's because they're good at negotiating. And so those are signs of persuasion in the life of a very young CEO. All right, let's look at the second P. It stands for propelled. By propelled, we mean they are self-motivated. They have an inner drive that keeps them going. Now, related to this is an internal locus of control. What that means is our disposition, our outlook on life is not based on the environment, the external, but on the internal. Leaders need to have that because a leader will look at a circumstance or a situation in a business or an organization, and in spite of the downturn or in spite of what's happened in the past, they believe that good things can happen. And so they have an internal locus. Research shows that about 70% of people tend to have an external locus of control, and about 30%, and all of leaders that I found have an internal locus of control. That in spite of what they see around them, they believe that good things can happen. So they tend to have self-efficacy, meaning they believe that they can achieve things. They are achievement-oriented, and that achievement orientation tends to inspire others. So it's not just themselves, but it leads to influencing others. Now, here are a couple examples. One is a student is project and achievement-oriented and incorporating others. So either they initiate projects or clubs or activities at recess, but the result is that others follow them. And another one is the student inspires others by not giving up easily. So they do little pep talks, or you can hear them say, hey, you can do this, or let's make this happen. It could be on an athletic team or whatever situation, but they tend to inspire others and they encourage commitment and perseverance. That is an example of a propelled young person. Now, the third P stands for planner, and by that we mean this. They're comfortable with abstract thinking and coming up with ideas and assign tasks that others accept. So they both think strategically, but they're able to break it into a plan and break it into tactical steps. So by planner, we're not just talking about a blueprint or an engineer. We mean that they're able to see the big picture as well as the small picture. They can see where they want to go, but they are also to break it into steps and strategies of how to do that. That's what we refer to as strategic thinking. Now, a couple examples of this might be a student is good at organizing others in tasks. So again, it may be back to that recess game playing, or could be on an athletic team, or could be in a class project. So whether in formal or informal situations, they're sort of good at organizing and then say, John, I want you to do this, and Sally wants you to do this, and Juniper wants you to do this, and they break tasks up. Another example is a student reads the big picture and thinks creatively. So again, not just getting stuck and caught into the details, but they're able to see sort of the bigger picture of what they want to accomplish and or what an adult gives them to accomplish, and they figure out a way to do that. So you don't have to tell them what to do, you just have to say, here's what we want to accomplish, and they'll figure out a plan of how to do that. That is an example of planning in the life of a future CEO. The fourth P stands for power. And by that we mean they exude boldness and courage and confidence that impresses others to notice and to follow. Now, what's interesting about this of the 4 Ps is that they can have any of the other 3 and not truly be a leader, but this is really unique. Even though leaders will tend to have all 4 of these, the most unique is this one, power. The reason is because when you are a leader, you have to use power. A powerless leader is actually an oxymoron. Once you lose power, you cease to be able to lead. You're either a former leader or perhaps a future leader, but you're not a present leader. Now, a couple of examples of this might be a student gets labeled as a troublemaker or a disruptor. Students who feel that there's something wrong will stand up to a person of authority, even if they're much older or educated. For example, it could be a teacher, could be a coach, could be a principal. And they don't necessarily mean it disrespectfully, but they mean it because they want to take a stand because of inequity, unfairness, something that they believe should be done but isn't being done. Another example, a student gets selected for in-charge roles by others. Again, it could be by adults who like them and want them to be in charge because they see their influence. Or it could be by colleagues or peers who want to follow them and understand that they have leadership ability. Now, they don't title it, you have leadership ability, but they just acknowledge that this person is good being in charge and they feel comfortable. Why? Because they feel comfortable having power. So is everyone going to be a CEO? Well, of course not, but we use that just as an example, just as a term. But the bottom line is that everyone isn't designed to be a leader. Look at this graph. The 10% or the 20% on the left side, these are what we'd refer to as high leadership talent and ability. They are habitual leaders, meaning they constantly look for situations where they can be in charge. They feel comfortable doing that. In the middle are what we refer to as situational leaders. That's kind of the big middle there, the medium. These usually get developed over time so that as adults they become a middle manager or they become a classroom project leader, but they don't feel comfortable leading, but they tend to learn how to do it in certain situations. It tends to wear them out. They go home, they recover, they come back, and then they lead some more. And then the 20 to 30% on the right, they are low capacity, meaning they are really great followers and they can be educated, they can be geniuses. But they don't have that ability socially to lead others, and you don't want to put them in charge of things because not only will it be unfair for them, it'll be unfair for a lot of others. So this is kind of on the level of social influence in terms of capacity, and we want to identify those with high capacity so that we can develop them young, when they're vulnerable, when they're moldable, and when they're pliable. Now that's a fast overview of what we've learned. If you want to actually see this work and do an assessment on a student or on a child or a teen that you know, feel free to go to this website. It's called the NYLI. You will take it on the student and you'll actually get a graph, a printout that you can look at the 4 Ps. And again, we're talking about a combination of all 4, not just one or the other, but having all 4 together will be a strong indicator that if not a CEO, eventually your child, your teen is going to be a strong leader and you want to develop their potential at a very, very young age. Feel free to take advantage of the other resources in the description area below. And as we always say, if you want to change the world, you got to focus on leaders. But if you want to change leaders, focus on them when they're young.